November 1, 1943. Prelude to Iwo Jima? The humid Pacific air clung to my uniform as we boarded the landing craft, the waves slapping against the hull like distant drumbeats of a war yet to come. From the shore, dense jungle hills loomed, shrouded in mist, hiding enemy positions we could only imagine. Each man in my unit carried more than his rifle. He carried fear, anticipation, and memories of home that might never be revisited. Our intelligence briefings had painted Iwo Jima as a small island, strategically necessary for the upcoming push toward the Philippines, but as I stared at it, rising from the ocean like a jagged tooth, I doubted any briefing could convey the hell that awaited. Maps spread across the deck were smudged with notes, symbols, and arrows, showing landing zones, pillbox locations, and enemy fortifications. They gave a sense of order, a promise of planning, but none could measure the human cost written into every contour line of volcanic ash. I adjusted my helmet and checked my M1 carbine, its stock worn smooth by months of training and prior campaigns. Other Marines checked their gear: Thompsons, Browning automatic rifles, grenades clipped in pouches, and in a small corner, the prototype Stingers Milan Grevich had been quietly assembling. I had seen him at work in the makeshift workshop, his hands blackened with grease, the air thick with smoke and the smell of burning metal. He had fashioned these weapons from aircraft guns, adapting them to infantry use. They were heavy, unwieldy, and dangerous to anyone not trained to handle them, but they had firepower that could suppress the most fortified Japanese positions. The landing craft rumbled forward. Each man's face was a portrait of quiet resolve, eyes fixed on the distant shore. We rehearsed what we had been drilled to do 1,000 times: hit the beach, secure a foothold, advance inland. But as we approached, the first artillery shells began to scream past us, their trajectory a chilling reminder that theory and reality are often worlds apart. The water around us erupted in plumes as Japanese mortars found their mark, tossing men and equipment like rag dolls. From the bow, I watched Marines ahead of me scramble to keep their footing in the surf, rifles cradled, eyes scanning for fire, hearts hammering. Each step through the volcanic sand felt like a lifetime. Each bullet whistling past was a whisper of mortality. In that moment, strategy and maps melted away, leaving only the stark, primal demand to survive, to protect your brothers, and to advance despite the inferno. As we neared the beach, I noticed Tony Stein, standing slightly ahead, scanning the enemy positions. His eyes were calm, deliberate yet resolute. He carried what would later be called the Stinger, a weapon few understood, even fewer trusted. But Tony carried it as if it were an extension of himself. Every Marine understood its potential, but only Tony could wield it with such deadly coordination, timing bursts to maximize suppression without wasting precious ammunition. The first wave hit the sand. Bullets, machine gun fire, and explosions created a symphony of chaos. Men fell, cries of pain mingling with the roar of the surf. The psychological weight of the moment pressed down on everyone. Fear was constant, but discipline, training, and sheer necessity forced action. Every Marine knew that hesitation meant death. Every decision mattered. Above the chaos, we began to see the advantage of Grevich's improvisation. The Stinger's fire erupted from Stein's position, a stream of lead that hammered Japanese pillboxes, suppressing enemy gunners and allowing demolition teams to advance. The weapon was unlike anything we had faced or carried. It was a testament to ingenuity born of desperation, the kind of innovation that could turn the tide of a single engagement. But it was not enough to simply wield the weapon. It required courage, judgment, and timing. One wrong move, and the fire could be wasted, the operator exposed, or the team annihilated. And Stein, seemingly untouched by fear, timed his bursts with a precision that was almost clinical. Watching him, I realized that technology alone could not win battles. It was the man behind the weapon, the courage, the resolve, the willingness to stand upright under fire, that created its effect. November 2, 1943, first landings and firestorm. The surf was relentless, carrying us toward a shore that seemed to erupt in fire. Every landing craft that reached the beach became a target. Mortar shells exploded, sending columns of water and sand into the air, and machine gun fire ripped across the volcanic ash. Men screamed, some in pain, others in sheer terror, while the smell of salt, smoke, and blood filled the air. I clutched my carbine and pressed forward with the others, feeling the grit of black volcanic sand under my boots. Every step was a negotiation with death. Bodies littered the beach, some Marines frozen in the moment of landing, rifles still clutched, faces etched with disbelief. Others crawled, dragging themselves toward cover. Survival became the only metric, the mission almost secondary. Above us, Tony Stein and his Stinger team took position behind a shattered bunker. The weapon's belt-fed system hissed as rounds were chambered. The Stinger roared to life, a torrent of lead unlike anything the Japanese defenders expected. Pillbox gunners were forced to duck, their heads popping up only to retreat again under the relentless fire. Demolition teams rushed forward, grenades in hand, exploiting the fleeting seconds created by the Stinger's suppressive effect. Every Marine had a role. Riflemen pinned enemy positions, flamethrower teams cleared bunkers, and medics darted between the wounded, performing miracles under fire. I saw Stein make his first run back to the beach for more ammunition. Each trip was a gauntlet, bullets slicing through the air, mortars throwing up chunks of sand and rock. Yet he moved as if guided by instinct, each step calculated, each movement deliberate. The psychological toll was immediate. Fear clung to us like a second skin. Some men froze, unable to move, overwhelmed by the chaos. Others became almost mechanical, moving on sheer will and training. The Stinger's fire did more than suppress enemy gunners, it broke minds, instilling hesitation where there had been resolve. Japanese defenders, trained and disciplined, suddenly found themselves reacting, not acting, as if the weapon had bent time itself, creating seconds that were lifetimes for us. By the end of the first day, we had secured a precarious foothold. The price was written in the sand, dozens of Marines lost, others wounded, the landscape scarred with craters and debris. We paused briefly, taking stock, tending to the injured, and readying for what the next day would bring. Tony Stein made another run back to the beach, Stinger roaring in hand. I followed from a distance, watching him coordinate with gunners, reload boxes, and redistribute ammunition. The synergy between Stein and the weapon was almost symbiotic. He understood the Stinger's limitations as much as its lethal strengths. Overheating was constant, ammunition scarce, but his tactical judgment allowed him to maximize the weapon's potential. Grevich's ingenuity had provided us with the tool, but Stein's courage made it effective. A different Marine might have held the weapon cautiously, might have avoided exposure, might have survived longer but achieved less. Stein understood that survival was secondary to the mission, that calculated risk was necessary to protect others. As night fell, the island seemed almost calm, but every Marine knew it was a temporary lull. Fires burned across the beach, illuminating the twisted forms of bunkers and the distant flashes of artillery. The island was alive with danger, every shadow a potential threat. Sleep was impossible, rest fleeting. The men whispered stories of home to maintain sanity, their voices barely audible over the distant groans of the wounded and the crackle of burning debris. We knew the next day would demand more. More courage, more ingenuity, more sacrifice. Every step inland meant confronting entrenched Japanese defenses. Every hill climbed meant risking death. And yet, in the midst of terror and carnage, the Stinger had proven that innovation born of necessity could save lives, could give Marines a fighting chance, could shift the balance in moments where conventional tactics faltered. February 19, 1944, the heroic assault. The day broke cold and gray. Ash from the volcanic soil clung to everything, our uniforms, our skin, our lungs. The Japanese fortifications loomed like jagged teeth across the beach, pillboxes carved into the black hills, firing ports that spat death with precision. We had faced many days of combat, but February 19th would etch itself into memory, into history. Tony Stein moved among us with quiet determination. The Stinger in his hands was an extension of himself, its weight, its heat, its roar all understood instinctively. He had memorized the layout of the defensive positions, knew where fire converged and where suppression was needed most. The weapon wasn't just firepower, it was a psychological force. Japanese gunners, trained to repel beach assaults, hesitated under the torrent of lead, unable to anticipate the speed and density of the bursts. Stein exploited that hesitation relentlessly. 8 times he ran back to the beach for ammunition. Each trip was an exercise in courage bordering on madness. Bullets whistled past, sand and shrapnel flew like rain, yet Stein pressed on. For every Marine pinned by enemy fire, for every wounded comrade struggling to crawl to cover, he risked everything. He exposed himself deliberately, drawing fire to locate enemy positions, his tactical judgment honed by combat and para-Marine training. The Stinger's impact was immediate and devastating. Concentrated bursts ripped through pillbox firing ports, forcing defenders to retreat, creating gaps for demolition teams and riflemen to exploit. The weapon's high rate of fire, 3 times faster than conventional machine guns, produced an overwhelming effect that conventional weapons could not replicate. But it was Stein's courage that made it work. Without him, the Stinger was just a tool. In his hands, it became a lifeline. I watched him move, fluid and purposeful, across open ground, carrying wounded Marines back to safety between firing runs. He coordinated with other gunners, redistributed ammunition, improvised firing positions, and never hesitated. Each act of bravery was verified by those who saw it: the company commander, battalion leaders, witnesses who would later testify to the extraordinary courage displayed that day. The psychological dimension of combat was as potent as the physical. The Japanese, disciplined and resilient, were human. They felt fear, hesitation, and doubt in the face of relentless Stinger fire. The weapon demoralized them as effectively as it inflicted casualties. Every suppressed pillbox, every forced retreat, every moment of hesitation was a gift of time and life to our men advancing under fire. By the day's end, Stein's actions had directly contributed to the survival and success of countless Marines. The Stinger, created in a workshop by Milan Grevich and John Little, had proven its tactical worth. Its legacy, however, was inseparable from the courage of the warrior who wielded it. Stein's Medal of Honor citation would later reflect this unique synergy, the only citation to explicitly reference an unauthorized weapon modification in combat. As darkness fell over Iwo Jima, the beach was a landscape of devastation and resilience. Fires smoldered, wounded Marines were attended to, and the living tried to process the horror of what had occurred. Yet amid the ash and carnage, the actions of men like Tony Stein illuminated a profound truth: courage and innovation, when combined, could alter the course of battle, save lives, and define history. Aftermath, recognition, and legacy. The Battle of Iwo Jima ended, but the echoes of that day lingered. Survivors returned from the volcanic sands carrying grief, wounds, and memories too heavy to share. Bodies of fallen Marines were collected, field hospitals overflowed, and the scope of sacrifice became painfully clear. Among those who would never return was Tony Stein, whose courage on February 19 had saved countless lives. The process to award him the Medal of Honor began immediately, spurred by his company commander's first-hand report. Stein's actions, charging pillboxes, operating the Stinger under fire, making 8 trips to the beach for ammunition, carrying wounded Marines, were meticulously documented by multiple witnesses at every level of command. Battalion, regimental, and division commanders reviewed and endorsed the recommendation. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, Marine Corps Commandant Alexander Vandergrift, and Chief of Naval Operations Fleet Admiral Ernest King all approved, culminating in President Harry Truman's authorization. Stein's Medal of Honor received 15 endorsements, the most of any award from the Iwo Jima campaign, reflecting both the extraordinary nature of his actions and the number of witnesses who could attest to them. The citation highlighted his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, detailing the Stinger's improvised design, his suppression of enemy fire, and his unwavering dedication to his comrades. It remains perhaps the only Medal of Honor explicitly recognizing an unauthorized weapon modification. On February 19, 1946, exactly 2 years after the battle, Joan Stein, Tony's widow, received the medal at a ceremony at the Ohio State House. Vice Admiral Frederick Pinoy Jr. placed the medal around her neck as Governor Frank Losh and Tony's mother, Rose Stein, looked on. Tears streaked their faces, grief and pride intertwined in a moment that honored extraordinary sacrifice but could never restore the life lost on that distant volcanic beach. A dispute later arose between Joan and Rose regarding burial arrangements. Rose wished for a traditional Jewish cemetery, while Joan wanted Catholic funeral rites reflecting their shared faith. Military authorities sided with Joan, and Tony's remains, returned from Iwo Jima in December 1948, were buried at Calvary Cemetery in Dayton following services at Our Lady of the Rosary Church. The burial provided closure, yet the void of loss remained. Meanwhile, the 6 Stinger weapons, emblematic of wartime ingenuity, disappeared from history. The Marine Corps, adhering to strict standardization, likely destroyed them. They consumed ammunition at unsustainable rates, required specialized training, and existed outside official doctrine. Authorization for their construction, granted to Milan Grevich at the battalion level, did not extend to preservation. After the war, mass production was considered but abandoned when Japan surrendered. Non-standard equipment was routinely destroyed, erasing the Stinger from formal military memory. Yet the impact of the Stinger was profound. Grevich and Little had created a weapons system in just 3 months, identifying capability gaps, fabricating components without blueprints, testing, refining, and training gunners. Its high rate of fire and concentrated suppressive power gave Marines a tactical advantage that conventional weapons could not. Though it never entered official service, the Stinger's role in saving lives and enabling victory at Iwo Jima endured in the memories of those who wielded it. Grevich returned to Minnesota, living a quiet life while carrying the weight of what he had done. He never sought recognition, believing the weapon was simply a practical solution to a tactical problem. His humility reflected a generation of veterans who served, survived, and returned home without fanfare, carrying memories that could not be shared. The Stinger may have vanished physically, but its spirit, innovation under fire, initiative in the face of bureaucracy, courage in the midst of chaos, became part of Marine Corps culture. Tony Stein and Milan Grevich embodied a profound truth: success in combat often requires individual initiative, courage, and innovation, even when official channels cannot provide solutions quickly enough. The Stinger's legacy reminds us that regulations exist to serve the mission, not the other way around, and that lives are saved by those willing to do what needs to be done, regardless of formal authorization. Follow for more.